Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. As you know, Jim Garrity is away. He is in Ukraine. Hopefully you're reading the Morning Jolt. He'll be back sometime next week with us once again today. Very happy to have Scott Bertram, the general manager of WRFH Radio Free Hillsdale on the campus of Hillsdale College, 101.7 FM. He is the host of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour and also co-host of Wasn't That Special, 50 years of Saturday Night Live. And Scott, always great to have you with us. Thanks for your time.
Glad to be here, Greg. It just occurred to me as we started. People think that we can see each other, which we can, but really we're both looking into cameras so that we look like we're looking at the audience. So I can see Greg like peripherally out of the corner of my eye, but I'm not actually looking at Greg when we do this thing. It's weird.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing on my end, too. That's how we get these amazing reels, these short videos that you see on social media, and certainly you can see them on YouTube. Subscribe there, by the way, as well as on your favorite podcast platform. But yes, and there's more coming, hopefully soon, to YouTube. So stay tuned for all that. All right, we actually have good, bad, and crazy martinis today. And Scott, I feel like our theme today could be, are you reading the room? Especially on our first two martinis. In our first martini, seems like someone is reading the room. On the second one, absolutely not. So let's dive right in. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon.com, well, one of the richest men in the world. We'll talk about the richest man in the world in the second martini. And so he also, in addition to operating in space, because that's what billionaires do now. They got tired of being hot air balloon enthusiasts, and now they're going into space. And he also owns the Washington Post. Yesterday, he puts out this statement. I'm writing to let you know about a change coming to our opinion pages. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. There was a time when a newspaper, especially one that was a local monopoly, might have seen it as a service to bring to the reader's doorstep every morning a broad-based opinion section that sought to cover all views. Today, the internet does that job. I am of America and for America and proud to be so. Our country did not get here by being typical, and a big part of America's success has been freedom in the economic realm and everywhere else. Freedom is ethical, it minimizes coercion, and it's practical. It drives creativity, invention, and prosperity. He then goes on to say he invited the current opinion page editor to stay on if he was all in on this, but David Shipley, who Jim Garrity writes for, Jim's a columnist over there, said, no, I don't want to do that. So he's looking for a new opinion editor over there at the Washington Post now. And he closes by saying, I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America. I also believe these viewpoints are underserved in the current market of ideas and news opinion. I'm excited for us together to fill that void. So it seems like a breath of fresh air. It seems like common sense. And it also sounds like a guy who understands how the market and capitalism and free enterprise are supposed to work and is a rising tide that lifts all boats, as JFK said many, many years ago. And so I don't know that I love the idea of not having any opposing viewpoints on some of these issues. I think a robust exchange of ideas is good. I'm just happy that there's going to be a pro-freedom, personal liberty, pro-free markets approach at all on the opinion page. And so that's always a good thing. And hopefully he follows through on it.
There's kind of two angles to the discussion around this. One is whether or not he has the ability to, or whether or not he can do this. And whether or not he should do this from more of a business perspective, I guess. It's kind of the personal perspective and the business perspective. The business perspective first, that's sort of what you left off on, which is, he says explicitly, viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. And like you, I am unsure about that as a business proposition. I like occasionally reading something that is in direct opposition to what I believe. Allows me to know what the opposition is thinking, and it strengthens my opinions and sharpens the pillars on which I build my opinions. I actively seek out those voices occasionally on certain topics, and there are certain voices on the left I try to read as often as possible. It sounds like, at least to start, those kind of pieces won't be published by the Washington Post, and I'm not sure that makes for the best possible op-ed page. Even in Detroit, where the Detroit News is the conservative paper versus the Detroit Free Press, which is decidedly not. The Detroit News op-ed page often publishes opinions from the left. Of the left, they have a weekly Voice of Labor column, which is written by someone in the union labor movement. There are frequent columns by those who are not on the right. And so I do wonder if this will sort of adjust into something that looks like that. I don't know, but that's a business call, right? The other thing is the outrage felt by current Washington Post staffers and, of course, former Washington Post writers and staffers about how could he possibly do this and tear apart our institution, this vaunted Washington Post. And, Mark Antonio Wright at National Review yesterday wrote a very brief but good piece about this. Jeff Bezos has owned the paper for about a decade now. He's lost untold millions of dollars running it. All those subscriptions that rolled in around the time of Trump have faded away. We saw numbers earlier this year about revenue and page views and clicks all very down. And he's the guy who owns it. And it is relatively new that the guy who owns the paper doesn't have a say in the way the opinion page sounds. The LA Times also recently adjusted their op-ed page in this manner. That used to be the way it always was. And only recently, essentially, have the employees be allowed to run the asylum, where they decide the tone of the paper and what's appropriate and what's not. And the New York Times spikes a Tom Cotton piece because they don't think it's appropriate to write. That's a very new thing. The guy who owns the printing press, the paper in this case, has a lot to say about what goes on in the paper. So, of course, it's well within his rights to decide the way he wants the op-ed section to read and be run. And someone else on X yesterday said, because there have been a number of changes in the past year at the Post. Someone said, it seems like Jeff Bezos picked up a copy of the Post last year for the first time in a decade and said, oh, this is what my paper looks like? This is what we're printing? Oh, I don't like this at all. And it started to make a lot of changes. And this is certainly one of them.
When Trump was first elected, 2016, the Post changed their little thing at the top of the front page of democracy dies in darkness, like they're the last vanguard against authoritarianism. And so I don't think that's necessarily going to change. Maybe it will. But the phrase that jumped into my head is that groupthink dies in sunshine. We're finally getting some new ideas here. I would encourage him to have ideas throughout the spectrum. But the idea of personal liberty being encouraged, open free market activity, free enterprise being encouraged on the editorial pages of the Washington Post would be fantastic. I hope the left doesn't hijack this idea, though. I can imagine that the lefties, would, personal liberties. Well, let's write a lot about abortion and minors having sex change surgeries, that sort of thing. But hopefully that doesn't give them any ideas. And hopefully we see more robust ideas like free speech and, removing regulations and barriers to entry in business and things like that. I think that would be a huge upgrade. The newspaper industry is in a lot of trouble no matter what they put in terms of the content because of the internet and so forth. But having an editorial page, an op-ed page that actually appeals to a broad spectrum of readers can only help.
And remember what was said when conservatives complained about then Twitter and Facebook and, suppressing the reach of posts. If you don't like it, start your own paper. Hey, there's an opening in the market for a paper that has a all left all the time op-ed page and reports from the perspective of perhaps federal workers and are very sympathetic to the bureaucratic state. Go start it. It's out there. It's out there for you.
Bezos was already not the darling of the left anymore when he decided not to endorse in the presidential race last year. That got some people resigning. And then Jen Rubin left, which was a huge upgrade, addition by subtraction, and now this. So we'll see what comes next. But definitely keep Jim Garrity on the op-ed page. That's my one mandate to Mr. Bezos. All right, let's talk about ZocDoc. Just went to the doctor this morning, in fact. But when was the last time you need to go to the doctor, but you pushed it off? What excuse did you have? Were you too busy? Were you like a typical guy saying, it'll feel better, just give it a day or two. I don't need to go. It'll just be a waste of time and money. But look, if you know that you need to go to the doctor, you can give yourself a ton of excuses, but there's an easy way to make those excuses go away, and that is ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. I have used ZocDoc before in searching for doctors and also setting up appointments, which is so much better than trying to get somebody on the phone and having to wait on the phone and then trying to navigate. You see every time that doctor has appointments and could not be simpler. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML ZocDoc.com/3ML. ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, Scott, let's move on to our bad martini, but there's a lot of crazy in this martini as well. As you know, whenever Republicans usually are trying to just secure the border or trying to stop amnesty legislation or trying to round up criminal illegals, the Democrats immediately cry foul on how we're tearing apart families and that sort of thing. And so it's fun to watch the Democrats now have completely different arguments depending on who the immigrant is. There was a rally not that long ago. In fact, I think it was this week. Pramila Jayapal, I'm not sure if she's still the head of the House Progressive Caucus, but she certainly has been and may still be. This is the more typical Democratic argument when it comes to immigrants.
Immigrants are us. Yes. Immigrants are us, and we all deserve respect and dignity. That's right. If you look at the food that's on your table, think about who picked it. Right. Yeah. If you look at your homes, think about who built them. Yeah. If you look at your vulnerable elders and your kids, think about who's taking care of them. Yeah.
So, yes, and she forgot to mention the people who clean your toilets. That's how Democrats usually think of immigrants coming to this country. But now we have another immigrant who the Democrats do not like at all. He happens to be the richest man in the world also. His name is Elon Musk, and he's spearheading the Doge effort to root out wasteful spending and corruption in government. And that is not sitting well with Democrats either. You have to ask why, I guess. But Marcy Kaptur, longtime Democrat from northwestern Ohio, is not so sure that this immigrant is loyal to his new country.
Mr. Musk has just been here 22 years, and he's a citizen of 3 countries. I always ask myself the question, with the damage he's doing here, when push comes to shove, which country is he loyalty to? South Africa? Canada? Or the United States? And he's only been a citizen, I'll say again, 22 years.
He's only been a citizen for 22 years.
When you've been in Congress for 40, 22 sounds like nothing. It's a walk in the park.
So what do you make of the split personality here on the left? It all depends which immigrant you're talking about.
Telling and not a surprise. Just like there are billionaires the left loves, J.P. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, and Mark Cuban and others, as they decry billionaires, there are immigrants that the left hates, even as they praise immigrants for, as you mentioned, all those reasons previously. The crux of this being that he's only been here 22 years, and so you don't know if his loyalty is going to be with us or South Africa is a strange argument, unless you consider he is the deepest of the deep, in terms of this long-term plan to infiltrate the country and the highest reaches of government and then execute some plan that eventually will benefit South Africa at the expense of the United States. It's not believable. He's a guy that has certainly benefited by his time in the United States, certainly benefited, his companies have benefited by being based in the United States. There's nothing that indicates, right? There's nothing that indicates he's acting in some sort in league with foreign countries that he also enjoys citizenship with. The left would go and still would today go apoplectic if you question the loyalties of, say, Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib here in Michigan, and say something about, who are they really serving, anything along those lines. They, of course, would call you a racist and the worst names of the book. You'd have CNN reporters roaming the halls of Congress asking other elected officials if you agree that if this were turned around, there'd be in the halls of Congress now asking, do you think Elon Musk is secretly working to benefit the South African government as he works in Doge and his people are looking for cost savings and efficiencies across government? Is it really a secret plot to benefit South Africa? Those are the kind of things that would happen if the shoes were on the other foot here. And we say that often, but sometimes it's so stark. I mean, this is the exact line of attack that has been characterized as being just the worst of the worst, when even the people on the fringe, much less actual congressmen, congresswomen use it, and yet there's no discussion about that here.
No, it's absolutely insane. And if you watch Elon Musk's comments from time to time about what's happening in South Africa, they're not exactly positive. He could be doing deep cover there, Scott. I don't know. He's publicly criticizing it, but really doing the bidding of that regime all the while. But it's just interesting that your politics determine exactly what the media and the left think of you. I mean, RFK Jr. is a perfect example of this. I don't think his views have changed a lot. I'm not a big fan of RFK Jr., but, back when he was going on MSNBC every night during the George W. Bush administration, railing against environmental policies and other things, they were perfectly happy with him. But now that he was challenging Biden, and certainly once he endorsed Trump, he was absolutely public enemy number one. And that really probably started during the COVID crisis, given his skepticism of the vaccines and so forth. But it all depends on your situation. I, however, am kind of loving this in a sense, because we like the fact that we're finally looking under the hood of government. We're seeing where the wasteful spending is, where the corrupt spending is. We almost did a story today on over $100 million going to organizations directly linked to terrorist organizations. And then at the same time, the backlash to Elon Musk means that the electric vehicle market is taking a punch. So there's really a win-win situation, I think.
The backlash is interesting, too, in that by putting this target on Elon Musk and saying he's the worst person in the world, and he's destroying you, and he's taking away your democracy, and he's taking away your liberties, and he's taking away this, and he's going to eliminate social, whatever they say. There are actual real-world consequences. There have been reports of Tesla charging stations defaced, graffiti, just bad enough. A story yesterday, too, about explosives being found at a Tesla dealership out in Colorado, and also some graffiti out in that direction as well. And so, yeah, when you get up and say things like, I question his patriotism, I question whether he's really loyal to the United States. Now, in addition to everything else being said, there are people out there who could be convinced to take it to a different level, I suppose.
Yeah, that's no good. You gotta stop that as soon as you can. But that's the potential outflow of this rhetoric, and so it's just incredible to watch the language game too. The fact that he bought Twitter and did not, shut down speech that the government didn't like, that makes him a threat to democracy. Just chew on that for a couple of minutes. And so I'm sure that Elon potentially sees some long-term benefit business-wise from being tight with the president. I don't know that he's entirely doing this out of the goodness of his heart, but the fact that he's or the allegation that he's some sort of double agent is preposterous.
Or it could be the plot of a new movie coming out in 2027. One of the two.
Well, it's usually some adventurous billionaire who's a Bond villain, but I don't think it's him. Soros maybe, but I don't think it's Musk. All right, Scott, on to our final martini now. And inflation remains stubborn. We saw the last month, it was at 3% year over year. And the majority of that time was during Joe Biden's last month in the White House. We'll see what the number is in the coming weeks here. And it's, probably not going to change overnight. Trump did talk about it at the cabinet meeting yesterday in front of reporters, which I was happy to see. I think it's important that the American people know they're actually trying to work on this. He has said throughout the campaign and since becoming president that a big key of this is ramping up energy production, domestic energy production. You increase the supply, price comes down, and the cost of shipping everything from here to there goes down, which means prices go down for consumers. So hopefully that can happen soon. And also tightening the spending belt in Washington, if Congress can go along with what he wants to do there, would be great as well. May not happen overnight, but I feel like those two ingredients will certainly help. Nonetheless, the left is certainly excited about blaming Trump. You might remember during the Biden years, especially when gas was hitting, well, at least in some parts of the country where I was, $5 a gallon, California, even more than that. They had those I did that stickers of Joe Biden pointing to the price. Well, the left, of course, copying that idea now. And it's a picture of Trump pointing and saying, I did that. And you tweeted about this, and there was a picture of that sticker on a carton of eggs, 60 count eggs for $24.49, with Trump saying, I did that. And for those of you in Rio Linda, that's a little under $5 per dozen, which compared to what I'm seeing in the grocery store, is actually a bargain. But nonetheless, you still want them down around $2 a dozen where they should be. You say, Scott, all's fair in politics and stuff, but I eagerly await the fact checks, explainers on this telling us that egg prices aren't really Trump's fault and the whole thing is very complicated and you can't just blame one man for the price spike and it's all really just propaganda anyway, which is exactly what the media kept telling us of Joe Biden. They even redefined what a recession was to protect Joe Biden at that time. And so we're also seeing headlines from the Associated Press that egg prices could soar more than 40% this year. And so battling the bird flu takes time to recover from. And so we'll see what all happens with there, though. But what do you make of what we're seeing on prices and the left's knee-jerk response here?
Yeah, it's a two-tiered discussion. One is on the prices, and certainly inflation is part of it, and bird flu is a part of it too, and supply is a part of it too. And the AP story that says egg prices could soar more than 40% this year, and they're around $5 around me. And so do the math. That's $2 more. That's $7 a dozen. That's no good. That's going to be a big problem, right? I mean, there's no way you can talk around that. The president promised on the campaign trail that prices would come down, and specifically eggs was one of the specific things that was talked about in the campaign trail. If we go from 5 to 7, that's not great, even though there are extenuating circumstances. And I don't know, I'm not the egg expert, what the answer is, right? The supply is lower than it should be. There are some states like here in Michigan that have, in Michigan is a new law that says only sell cage-free eggs. Out west, I can't remember what state it is. They have lifted for the moment that ban on caged eggs, or right, you know what I'm saying. And the explanation here is, well, that won't do anything to prices. And I'm not an economics major, and I understand that there are many different levers to pull, but you would think increasing the possible supply couldn't hurt, right? If you're limited to only cage-free eggs, and now you say, well, we could also use these other eggs, it can't hurt the supply, and hopefully prices too, in particular states. But if it gets to 7, or whatever it might be, it's going to be problematic. And Democrats are going to call out the president for not doing more. And I understand, I've heard J.D. Vance talk about this, the president talk about it. They've talked about unleashing American energy, driving energy prices down, which in turn will bring the prices down for eggs. That's great. Some of this is certainly a supply issue, and you can't do much to create new egg-laying hens. You can't snap your fingers. That's going to take some time. And so part of this will be messaging. How do you explain to the American public exactly what's happening and why perhaps this is a different sector, or there are different reasons for this increase than other places? To that sticker you were talking about, I did that. I looked yesterday, and there are these headlines from the gas stickers. Most successful piece of propaganda for Trump supporters. There's big explainers, as I said, about how, you can't blame one person. It's very complicated. The stickers are part of disputed claims, often pushed by Republicans, that Biden and his policies are to blame for the rapid rise in gas prices. Perhaps the most ubiquitous and successful piece of political propaganda the counterculture right has produced. So I'm just waiting for those pieces from ostensibly neutral, objective journalists also explaining how these Trump stickers also aren't accurate. Because if you are objective and neutral, you should treat that in the same way. If you see a sticker and say, well, I need to explain it to people, and then go through the machinations about why fuel prices are very volatile, and it's not just this policy X and Y, then certainly you'd want to explain to people why egg prices now are not just based on X and Y. There's many different inputs and supply, and this, I don't think we'll see that, because by and large the media will see this as an opportunity to give the Trump administration an L, right? You promised lower prices, they haven't happened yet, and these, they'll come around and say, well, these stickers actually are somewhat accurate. They're mostly true, right? Something along those lines. The fact check will say mostly true. Trump is responsible for this. And that's the way they'll handle these things. But I think it's you can't sort of explain away the danger of this. I know it's one item at the grocery store, but as we all know, every item has increased in price over the past 4 years, 5 years. Eggs, faster than others, and they're maintaining the high price now. And if you can't get those prices to go down, it's going to be something you have to address. You can't just let it sit out there.
Right. So I'm glad he's talking about it. And there may very well need to be other policies. Like you said, there's only so many chickens, and the demand is what it is. With the price going up, the demand may change a little bit, but I'm not sure how elastic it is. The AP story pointing out that 166 million birds have been slaughtered to limit the spread of the bird flu. So that's a lot of dead chickens. It's not all chickens, but most were egg-laying chickens. And so that's a big deficit to come back from in short order. So hopefully we can get back as soon as possible. So we are not a pop culture podcast, Scott, but you and I certainly enjoy it. And we both woke up, I assume, to the news this morning that Gene Hackman had passed away at 95. He retired a couple of decades ago from acting, but what a career. And, picking your favorite Gene Hackman role is kind of like picking your favorite child. It's almost impossible to do. He's probably most acclaimed for The French Connection and Unforgiven, both of which he won Oscars for. The one I've seen the most time certainly is Hoosiers and his role as Norman Dale. His comedy roles, he had a bit role in Young Frankenstein, but given when I was growing up, my favorite comedy role is him as Lex Luthor in Superman, the greatest criminal mind of all time, just flawlessly. What stands out for you?
Great actor, really great actor, versatile actor, and a guy who at one point in his career did a movie called Welcome to Mooseport with Ray Romano, and didn't like it and said, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore, and stopped acting. Like, that was it. Like, I didn't like the experience, don't like the film. I'm better than this. I've been doing it for 40 years. I'm done. And went away. So you respect that. Loved him in Hoosiers. Fantastic as the coach of the Indiana State Championship team. And I don't know if someone could have played the role any better than he did in Royal Tenenbaums, the Wes Anderson film. And apparently he was kind of a pain in the ass on set. But what comes through on the pictures in the film is outstanding. So he was really great. He's good in The Firm, too, which is, a fun popcorn John Grisham sort of movie. But generally, if you see Gene Hackman in a movie, it's not going to suck. You can say that.
Yes, that's exactly right. And Crimson Tide, I forgot to mention Crimson Tide. That's a great movie with him and Denzel Washington. So, a great talent. I'm sure a lot of us will be watching some Gene Hackman flicks over the next few days. But Scott, thank you for being with us today. I will see you again on Monday. Have a great weekend till then.
Thank you, Greg.
Scott Bertram is the general manager of WRFH, Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM on the campus of Hillsdale College. He hosts the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, and he is the co-host of Wasn't That Special? 50 Years of Saturday Night Live. I'm Greg Corombos, and thank you so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you haven't already. Tell your friends to do so as well. We'd love to have them listening. Also, thank you for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They are a big help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us all on X. Scott is at Scott Bertram with 1 T in Scott. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a great Thursday. Join us again Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.